it's a culmination of all of my study and the different threads to that. So there's psychology, there's yoga, there's fitness, and those modalities draw themselves together beautifully to empower people with nourishing skills and practices. But qualifications aside, it's my life experience that led me to this place, that helped me personally develop this toolkit. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping people remove the obstacles to nourishing themselves. And that life experience was becoming a mum at the same time as losing my dad. And I'd always had a very good relationship with self-care. I never felt like it was something that it wasn't okay to do. But that experience, my goodness, I was floored by that life experience. And so many of the things that I would normally do to sustain myself just weren't available.
Hey, welcome back to Normalize the Conversation. Today, I am here with Suzy Reading, psychologist, author, yoga teacher, and health and fitness coach. Suzy, thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. How are you really?
Oh, thank you for such a lovely, warm welcome, friend. Look, I've got to be honest with you. The sun is shining in the UK today. So I feel light and bright, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, I love that. It's always a nice day when the sun is shining. And I live in Florida, so people think it's sunny all year round, but once June hits, it is rain nonstop. So today is sunny here too. My dog and I went for a long walk today. So I'm feeling that, and I'm really excited to talk more with you. A lot of your work is built in self-care and taking those steps to change our lifestyle. So I would love to learn more about your work and what inspired you to take that path.
Sure. Well, it's a culmination of all of my study and the different threads to that. So there's psychology, there's yoga, there's fitness, and those modalities draw themselves together beautifully to empower people with nourishing skills and practices. But qualifications aside, it's my life experience that led me to this place, that helped me personally develop this toolkit. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping people remove the obstacles to nourishing themselves. And that life experience was becoming a mum at the same time as losing my dad. And I'd always had a very good relationship with self-care. I never felt like it was something that it wasn't okay to do. But that experience, my goodness, I was floored by that life experience. And so many of the things that I would normally do to sustain myself just weren't available. And I think this is something that we've all experienced in the last 2 years, right? Where, we face so many restrictions in the ways that we would normally nourish ourselves. And we've got to get really creative to find new ways of taking care of ourselves. And that can be really tricky in the midst of depletion and stress, loss, right?
Thank you for being so open and vulnerable. I'm so sorry for your loss. But like you said, that is so relatable, especially within the last 2 years. So many people, almost everyone lost something, whether it was a loved one or a job or some kind of income or the loss of the life they thought they were going to have. Just so many things changed, and we didn't have access to be able to go out and do things like we did in the past. And for a lot of us, self-care has looked like going to the spa or going shopping or whatever kind of the social media marketing has taught us that self-care is. And suddenly that was taken away, and it was like, good luck. So what advice do you have for someone who maybe in the past 2 years, suddenly just their self-care routine was kind of taken away and they don't know how to start something again?
Okay. I think the best place to start is being super gentle, being really tender with ourselves, and just acknowledging where we're at, because we're still in the midst of it. We're still processing and digesting and restoring. So rather than starting with the action, I would encourage people to just bear witness to where they're at and do that with great tenderness and give ourselves permission to feel as we do, right? There are really good reasons why we're still feeling overstimulated or disconnected, or just things feel wonky still, right? So bear witness with tenderness, and then just ask some gentle questions. What do I need today? What do I need to feel alive? You know, are there places that I can go to that help me feel full of life? Are there activities that I can engage in? Are there people that I want to connect with? Are there creative pursuits that I want to seek out? How do I want to express myself? Do I need to move my body? Do I need to be still? You know, the beautiful thing is that when we listen, I think we can work these things out. I think so often we override all of these messages from the mind and body, but a simple check-in, we'll find one thing, right? And if we can give ourselves permission to do that one thing, watch what blooms.
That is so true. Checking in with ourselves can be really, I don't want to say it's the answer to everything, but it's really that first step to finding an answer. And I'm always telling people around me, just check in with yourself and ask yourself questions and listen. And they're like, that sounds crazy. I'm not going to sit and talk to myself. But when you take a moment to just ask yourself, how am I? What's going on in my body? How am I feeling right now? What makes me feel good and what makes me feel strong? What's not making me feel strong? What's not making me feel good can really help us put that foot forward into the right direction. So after we check in with ourselves, what do you think is the next step?
I think we need to give ourselves permission to take some kind of restorative action. Yeah, so that check-in, that self-awareness, that self-insight, that gives us a clue as to what we need to do. That's the starting point. Then we need to do something with that. And for a lot of people, there's a sense of, I don't know how to do it. Well, that's okay. If you're not sure how, reach out, find out. Yeah, there are so many resources available. It doesn't necessarily have to be booking a session with someone. It can be listening to a podcast. It could be listening to someone's IGTV on a particular theme, right? There needs to be action. Yeah. So what is the nourishment that we need, and how can we weave that into our day in a way that's doable, in a way that's resonant? You know, it doesn't have to be something that we save for Sunday morning, right? It can be 30 seconds of looking out the window and seeing a bird on the wing and just giving ourselves a little circuit breaker moment. Or it might be picking up the phone and sending a message to someone and saying, I'm just thinking of you. Just wanted to let you know. Even that act of kindness gives us a little energy boost, right? So it can be really remarkably simple, but we need to do something. Yeah. There has to be some kind of compassionate action in there.
I love that, compassionate action. Action is so important. And like you said, so many people just don't know where to start. And to know that small steps and simple steps are a great place. I know for me, when I was beginning to start a self-care journey and figure out my own self-care routine, I went from doing nothing to I'm going to get up at 6 a.m., go to the gym, then I'm going to eat this healthy breakfast, then I'm going to go do this, and then I'm going to meditate, I'm going to make time to read, I'm going to do a face mask at night and just calm my whole body down. And it was like I added 200 things at once. And I was like, I'm just going to do all of it. And the reality was it lasted a day and a half, and then it was too much and too overwhelming. So simple steps, at least in my experience, were so important. Yeah,
I think there's beautiful insight there. And you want to harness that impulse. That was a beautiful impulse. We don't want to squash that. But at the same time, we've just got to be anchored in perspective that let's get excited about self-care, but let's not get too ambitious, or we don't want it to be another stick that we beat ourselves with. Can we just look at what are some little simple habits that we can embed in our day that actually, once you get that on automatic pilot, then there's the space to think about, well, maybe actually I could add that little thing, or maybe there's this great concept of piggybacking, right? Where you piggyback to an existing habit, something else. So like after you go to the loo and wash your hands, can you just take 20 seconds to rub in some hand balm and be tender with yourself? You know, it doesn't take much time and you're doing it anyway. So it's just an easy way of creating a new habit. But yeah, I think the micro moment, I call it little micro moments. These things have great power and they all accumulate, and they're a really simple place to start.
Micro moments. Wow. You know, back to what you said in the beginning, that compassionate action, being tender with ourselves. So like you said, rubbing our hands, what are some other ways that we can just take maybe 20 seconds, those micro moments, and be tender with ourselves?
That's such a great question. I want to give people a framework to try and organize these practices. If you think you can use your body, or you can use your breath, or you can use your mind. So that gives us 3. So in terms of using the body, let's think about maybe posture, maybe movement, chicken wing shoulder rolls, where we put fingertips on shoulders, breathe in, sweep the elbows up, and as you breathe out, take the elbows down. Okay, so that is a simple way of releasing tension. We know that movement has a potent antidepressant effect. It draws us into a tall upright posture that research shows connects us with a feeling of personal power, zest, optimism. 20 seconds, right? Chicken wing it out. So that's using the body. How can we use the breath? Now, to be honest, that's also a breathing exercise. I want to share a different breathing exercise that has a completely different energetic effect. What about one for when we're feeling really full up, when we're feeling angsty, maybe even a sense of rage? Lion breath, where we breathe in through the nose, we exhale through the mouth with the tongue extended as far out as possible, so it looks and sounds like this. So we are literally roaring it out, yeah? A beautiful wordless release that does no harm. So that's using the breath. So we've got the body, we've got the breath, and then using the mind. Can we please just extend some tender, coaxing, gentle words to ourselves? Yeah? It might be something as simple as, I give myself permission to feel as I do. I can be my own safe place. Or I just know that this feeling will pass. And you might have noticed I've brought my hands to my heart. I think these rituals are really potent when we can get the body, the breath, and the mind working all together. But I think it's an easy way to sort of think, what's accessible to me right now? Which way in? Body, breath, mind. There's always something accessible to us.
Wow, I love that framework, and checking in with what's accessible to us is so important. Going back to my own experience in the beginning, one of my favorite self-care things was to journal what I was feeling. But when my journal wasn't next to me or I didn't have my pen with me, I just got so anxious because I didn't know what to do. To the point where I brought my backpack with me everywhere. I would be in the middle of Target and just stop and sit down and journal. I was like, I have to write it out because I didn't know what else to do and I would get overwhelmed. So paying attention to what's accessible to you all the time, for me, was something so important to learn, because there are moments where your journal might not be available to you. Yeah.
Beautiful wisdom. I think that's it. Like we need a broad toolkit from which to draw, because just as different things will resonate for different people, it's also our own needs are ever evolving, but also the variables that we're in are constantly changing. And for a lot of people, there's a lot of frustration that they know they want to do this type of self-care, but they can't right now because in reality, that's not available. Well, what can meet that need? Can that thing take a slightly different shape? Can it be something shorter, or could it be met in a slightly different way. And that's why these conversations are so powerful. So thank you.
Thank you. I completely agree, having that broad toolkit. So now we talked about some of the things that we can do with ourselves. What are some examples of other things with external objects we can do for self-care?
Okay. Do you know what comes to mind there is sort of just acknowledging I'm a huge advocate for self-care, but I want people to understand that not for a minute am I saying that we have to do it all on our own. Right? This is not about shouldering our burden alone. We all need other people. We need to take care of ourselves, but we also need to be embedded in, a web of love and care and support. So I think this is a really beautiful opportunity to highlight that. We need to reach out. We need to feel held. We need to feel validated and supported, and we need to share the journey. And there are so many different ways of doing that. It can be picking up the phone, speaking with a friend, making plans to see someone face to face, but it can also be listening to a podcast and plugging in with a community that helps us feel part of something bigger than ourselves. So I think that can be a really powerful means of nourishment. Other ways that we can use other objects, Mother Nature. Mother Nature always has the tonic. Yeah, always sustaining. There's always a metaphor in nature. I love that I can go for a walk and there'll always be something that will either pique my curiosity or sort of help me find meaning. So seek nature out. Other things like maybe even having a talisman. I have a necklace that was given to me by my husband. There's a weight to it. I love feeling that. It could be wearing a piece of clothing that you like the texture of. I have a plate with a kingfisher on it that reminds me of my dad, because there's a special significance there. So I literally have morning tea with dad using that crockery, right? There's so many different ways that we can assign meaning to things and feel a sense of sustenance from it.
All of those are amazing. I love how you have tea with your dad. It's so important to find some sense of community and belonging in this feeling of not being alone. When we talk about mental health conditions, one thing that majority of them, I want to say all of them, really have in common is that fear of being alone and being the only one struggling. And not just for conditions, but mental health symptoms. When we're starting to feel symptoms of depression or feeling down, symptoms of anxiety, just overwhelmingness, fatigue, it can feel so isolating. So finding a community where you feel validated and heard and not like the only one, having friends you can reach out to, or just the memory of someone who means so much to you. For me, that's my grandfather, and I wear his sweater that I stole from him that he was so mad I stole. But whenever I'm just feeling like I need a hug and there's no one immediately around me to give a hug to, I just put on his sweater, and it's like that little reminder that I'm not alone. And I don't think there's enough conversation. I mean, people tell you all the time that you're not alone, but we don't talk enough about ways to feel not alone. So I really love how you brought that up.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful, that we find ways of feeling held even when we are on our own. Yeah. We can feel connected with others even when we're on our own. So it's such an important conversation. I love your strategies. They're beautiful. They speak to me too.
Thank you. I love your strategies. And I'm really curious. A lot of people talk about nature. I know for me, going for walks and feeling the sunshine on my skin. What about nature to you is kind of that self-care wellness property?
There's so much. I mean, I was raised on the northern beaches of Sydney. I love the ocean. There's something so symbolic to me about seeing the sunrise and feeling that freshness, that potential of a new day. I don't live there anymore. I miss that. But what I've learnt is to savor available joys. Now, I've moved to the UK. Apparently, where I've settled is actually the furthest point from the coast. So the ocean, the coast, it's not easily accessible. However, the greens that I can ingest are amazing. The trees, the woods, it's such a beautiful place. It's just a different beauty. And I think it's just about how can we plug in to the environment around us. There's such I love that actually can create a new home. When we feel connected with our local environment, that's what creates that sense of belonging. And birds. I love birds. I used to go for walks on the headland, and my dad and I would count the different types of birds that we saw. And I love teaching my kids about that because there's a sense of lineage and belonging. And I love that, with kids of differing ages, that's still a common bond, or with different generations. You don't even have to have conversation. You can just point, oh, look at that one. It's, it's just an effortless way to connect. So that's another one of nature's tonics for me.
That is absolutely beautiful. And what I'm loving about this conversation so much is it's not just, oh, these are ideas for self-care. It's practical ways to actually add them in, to implement, to understand what it means. For me, nature looks like just feeling that sun on my skin. But for you, it's the greenery, the walk, seeing the birds. It's different for everyone. And I think when it comes to self-care, even when it comes to coping skills, when it comes to things we can do for ourselves, we often see on social media what works for other people, and we think that has to work for us. And when it doesn't, it feels very overwhelming and confusing. And like we often internalize it to where I'm broken, something's wrong with me because the sunshine didn't make me feel good today, or going for that run didn't make me feel good, or meditating didn't make me feel good. So the unique perspective you're bringing to this conversation of how different it can look for everyone is just amazing.
And the fact that this is here to support us. And I'll be honest, there will be times when I go for a walk in nature's beauty and I will still come home feeling grief. This is not about striving for immunity from challenging mood states or uncomfortable emotions. The fact is, these practices support us in navigating these experiences. What I would say is, you don't know how bad you would have felt had you not done that thing, right? So we're not always going to come away from these things feeling sparkly and like, wow, full of life, but they just help us cope. Yeah. So it's kind of shifting the perspective of, it's not always about, we're not striving for perpetual happiness here. These practices help us in terms of our emotional health, be with our emotions and to move through them in safe and healthy ways.
I just could not agree more with that. It's so common to believe that utilizing a self-care routine or utilizing a coping skill or listening to a podcast, reading a book, just doing something that we think is supposed to be the right thing and then not feeling 100% better can be very invalidating for so many. Because why am I not suddenly happy? I did what I was supposed to do. And it's not all about just finding immediate happiness. It can take weeks or months for that feeling to start to come back. But every day, that small step forward, like you said, is allowing you to be there with your emotions and hopefully cope with it in a much healthier way than we often would if we didn't utilize those practices.
Yeah, beautifully expressed.
Thank you. So I would love to learn more about your books. I mean, you have so many books about self-care, so many different, can you tell us more about these books and how people can find them?
Sure. Well, I feel so lucky to have had the opportunity to write so many different resources. For anyone that's new to the concept of self-care, then I would suggest Self-Care Revolution is the best place to start. That's where I introduce my framework, the Vitality Wheel. And then I've had the opportunity to write for different people. So there's the Little Book of Self-Care, which is ideal for people who are flat out and frazzled. So there are 32 time efficient practices there. And then there's Stand Tall Like a Mountain, which is designed to be read by parents but shared with their children. And then I've got a book for kids themselves, which I loved writing, because I think sometimes kids don't want to get it from their grown-up. They want to be able to own it themselves. So I wrote This Book Will Help Make You Happy, which is designed for kids who can read themselves, to dip into it and to build their own self-care toolkit. And then more recently, Self-Care for Tough Times. So looking specifically at stress, loss, and change, and Breathe. People want to journal. There are reflective prompts there. And then Sit to Get Fit, which is all about infusing a little bit more movement and restful moments into our day. So there's something for everyone there.
That is amazing, the amount of resources you've created and the wide range of resources. Giving kids the opportunity to feel in charge of building their routine, I think, is so important. We don't often give enough importance to kids' individuality and their ability to take care of themselves and learn for themselves. So you
give me goosebumps. Yes. For any parents listening, honestly, so often we think we've got to provide all the answers, but time and time again, when I've worked with kids, in conversations with my own children, the solutions that they come up with themselves is like, oh my God, that's amazing. So let's co-create. Yeah, we don't need to spoon feed. Let's co-create. Let's have conversations. And I tell you what, I reckon I've learned as much from my kids as they have from me. Like, we're all learning and growing together.
Yes, kids really do have the ability to teach us stuff about ourselves, teach us their self-care. They come up with so many incredibly creative. One of the things Inspiring My Generation does is encouragement cards. And we make cards for patients hospitalized in behavioral health facilities. But my favorite piece of it is when I get cards made by kids. The messages they create, I'm like, wow, I never would have thought to so creative, so deep. They understand in a way we don't often realize they do. So I am just a huge fan of the fact that you created a resource directly for kids.
Oh, thank you. It was such a joy to write. I hope it can make a difference. It's about skills. And for so many parents, this wasn't modeled for us growing up. So it can be hard to have these conversations around emotional health, mental health, boundaries. So, as a parent, you can read Stand Tall Like a Mountain, which is designed for you, and your child can be reading This Book Will Help Make You Happy, and you're both reading about the same thing, but from different perspectives.
That is incredible. It's bridging the gap in the conversation because, like you said, these weren't necessarily conversations we were having a decade ago, let alone when parents were really growing up and having the opportunity to learn mental health, self-care. That was all taboo. It was being selfish. And we've moved into a much safer world to have these conversations, and to give parents that guide to have it with their kids is incredible. Suzy, you've been absolutely amazing today. Thank you so much for joining me. Before we wrap up, do you have any last piece of advice or wisdom you can share to our listeners?
Oh, just let it be tenderness. I think if people find it hard to know where to start, if we can just put our hands on our heart and just offer up a little tender word, that can be enough to create a shift. Yeah. Beautiful things bloom from that place of self-compassion.
Wow. I love that, Suzy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fran. Just an absolute joy to be in your company. Thank you for your beautiful questions.